Good evening, morning, afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the webinar of Buying in France. I'm Emilie, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Fine&Country, and I will be your host for tonight. So just a quick reminder that there is a chat that is accessible to you, where you can ask all your questions. We have received quite a lot of questions already. We will try to go through them as much as we can. We may not be able to go through all the questions tonight. So by the end of the night, by the end of the webinar, we will share with you the details of all the people that are present on the panel, and any questions that we won't be able to cover, we will be able to answer them separately after this webinar. But we will do everything we can to cover as much as possible. So with no further ado, let's start the introduction of our panel of experts. Alice, you want to start?
With pleasure. So hello everyone, my name is Alice Watson-Smith, the director of the Fine&Country office based in Cannes and covering the whole French Riviera and into Provence. And I'm really looking forward to being joined by the rest of the panel and really getting straight into it. I think this is the third webinar we've done now on buying in France, and they've been extremely well attended. We have some excellent questions and there's lots to get through tonight. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much. Tracy, over to you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Tracy Leonetti. I'm a relocation expert based in the south of France for the last 30 years. I'm the founder and CEO of LBS, a team of 5 are here to help you with all your relocation needs from a paperwork perspective. So of course, visas, healthcare, driving licenses, car registration, whatever it is you need from a paperwork, we're here to help you.
Fantastic. Leo?
Bonsoir and bienvenue. I'm the founder of Fortier Finance. We are a whole of market mortgage broker based in the south of France, and we focus on high value mortgages in prime lending locations. So the Côte d'Azur, Paris, the French Alps and Provence.
Fantastic, thank you. Tom?
Good evening, I'm Tom Marron. I'm one of the partners at Blevins Franks. We provide strategic tax and financial planning for people who are resident in France or thinking about becoming resident in France. Really, it's about helping people understand how the French tax system applies to them and really making their move as tax efficient as possible. We've been providing our services for 50 years. I personally have been at the company for 10 years, latterly in the Languedoc region, but more recently in the Valbonne area in the Côte d'Azur. We provide our services all across France. We also advise on investments and pensions. And really, as I say, it's about helping to make our clients' lives and their moves to France as tax efficient as possible.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but not least, Jonathan.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jonathan. I'm a currency specialist, one of the senior traders at Lumon. So we're an international payment provider specializing in the overseas property market. I'm also very interested in France, beautiful country, love going there on holiday. And yes, I'm also very interested in the FX markets and have appeared in the media discussing currency forecasts. So we're just going to find out a little bit more about you, our audience this evening, just to understand a little bit more about where you might be in the buying process. As you're probably aware already, buying a property overseas doesn't happen overnight, and in France you're looking at anywhere from sort of a good 2 to 3 months depending on the type of property, but from that sort of initial offer going into the completion. So just understanding where you are in that process of actually looking at a property in France is really useful to us to try and give you the most relevant information that we can. So thank you very much everyone who is responding there. A lot of people looking in the early half of this year. It's quite interesting. We have seen a lot of interest in France already this year, so that really chimes with certainly what I've been looking at so far this year. So thank you very much everyone who has answered that poll. I'm going to launch a second one in relation to the financial aspect when you're financially in a position to put forward an offer. This is important certainly from a currency perspective. Of course, the exchange rate when you're an overseas buyer, that is ultimately what will determine what you're actually paying for the property. And we've seen a lot of volatility in the FX markets this year. Of course, there's a new man in the White House, and that is having an impact on the currency markets globally. So whether you're in the US or in the UK, anywhere in the world, certainly the euro has been, it's actually been quite a good time to buy euros in the last couple of years, but we have seen a bit more volatility lately. So thank you very much, everyone who's answered that poll. Our third one, there's 4 to go. Our third one is about where in France you're looking. Look, it's no accident that France is the world's most popular tourist destination. Beautiful beaches, amazing weather, incredible food. There's so much to choose from. So just understanding where you're looking to buy is really helpful for us to give some of the details of some of these lovely areas. And a lot of people looking in the French Riviera, which I know we've got a lot of experience on the panel today. So that's very interesting to see, as well as the South and the Southwest. So thank you everyone who's answered that poll. And then our final poll, again asking you, our lovely audience, just whereabouts you're joining us from. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, the buying process will still be the same for buying into France, but there can be little nuances, certainly in terms of banking, obviously the currency question, you know, it depends what base currency you have, and there could be some extra points to consider from a sort of residency visa or even wealth management point of view. So a lot of people from the UK, but we're also seeing a large contingent there from America and some elsewhere in the world. So thank you very much, everyone who's answered those polls, and back to you, Emilie.
Thank you very much. Yes, France is a beautiful country. I'm not biased in that one at all. Without further ado, as I said, we'll get onto the questions. We selected 3 questions per panelist to start with, and then if we have time, we'll get through more, which I'm sure we will. But to start with, I will start with Alice, if I may. And Alice, the first question for you is, what is the buying process when making a first purchase in France, and what are the timelines and costs involved?
Right, so the buying process in France, and I think it was Jonathan actually that briefly touched on it now, is in general, all being well, 3 months. Yes, there are sales that can go through slightly quicker. Yes, there are sales that take longer. But in general, it's a 3-step process, if you will, from the kind of real estate side, that starts with the offer being agreed between buyer and seller. It's normally a signed offer that is an agreement of basic terms, I would call it, rather than anything else, an agreement of basic terms between buyer and seller. The file is then passed to the notary by the agent. So a full file is collected of documents. You have probably about 2 weeks during which the notary draws up a draft sale agreement called a compromis de vente or a promesse de vente. Once that is signed, and it can be signed by DocuSign, so it's not always necessary to be in France, it can be signed at distance. It's then minimum of a 2-month process normally, which is the preemption right of the town. It's how long it takes, and that's normally about 2 months minimum. So all in all, the process is 3 months is what you can count on average. And the costs involved, I think there've been some other questions on this, and we might get into more detail on it. But in general, and to just give an outline at this point as the buyer, you pay what's called the notary fees. It actually encapsulates the taxes, the transfer duties, the notary fees as well, etc. And that comes to about 7.5% on top of purchase price. And in most cases, the agency fees themselves are included in the selling price or in the marketing price that you will see as a buyer. So in general, about 3 months to purchase, and in general, the additional costs on top of purchase are about 7.5% for purchase fees.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, we had quite a lot of questions about additional costs outside of buying the property, so that's really interesting. Then the next question for you is, how can buyers ensure they're getting a fair price and not overpaying for a property?
So, of course, this is a very pertinent question, I think, probably for most people on this webinar, and completely understandable. It's always a challenge, I think, to understand a different market in a different country. The data is not the same that is available in France as would be, for example, in the US or in the UK. It's also much more recent in terms of the number of years that the data is available in terms of recent sales. So what I would say, and it's going to sound biased, but it comes genuinely because I believe in it, is probably the easiest way for buyers is to really find an agent that they trust, that they enjoy working with, and to use that agent to help them find the right properties. We do a lot of what's called co-agence in France. So it's similar to the American system, where you then have a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. You as the buyer then have your interests protected, and that agent that you choose, whoever that may be, can search with all of the agencies in the region that you're looking in the price bracket, etc., pull together the properties that correspond to what you're looking for. It's a bit of a minefield otherwise. There's a lot of different websites, there's a lot of properties available, sometimes even at different prices, etc. You may have seen this. So using a professional in France that can pull together the right properties that correspond to your needs with other agencies as well means that they're really there to help you field through the properties, understand the pricing with you. They have access to information which can help you with doing estimations, etc., for the property that you're potentially interested in. So rather than looking with lots of different agents, where each agent will give you different advice, but not necessarily for your, as the buyer's benefit, if I may be so bold. If you have one agent, they're really, they're there to look after you. So if there's an agreement between you and an agent, I think it's probably your best way to actually be sure of getting as close as possible to what is the true market value of a property, using a professional who can guide you.
Fantastic, thank you. And the last question for you for now is, are there any differences in the buying process timelines for non-French residents?
No, in fact, there might be slight differences in terms of money transfers from a different country, or that sort of thing, or someone that wants to be here to sign and they need to come from England or whatever, and then we work around their timelines. But in reality, the sales process will be the same, whether you're resident or non-resident, whether you're in the country, not in the country, it's exactly the same. There are no additional time constraints, if you will, on either side. It's the same.
Okay, so 3 months for everyone.
Yeah.
French or not French.
Very lucky it can go through faster, and we have cases, but it's the exception, not the rule.
Not the rule. Okay, well, let's go actually to money transfer then. Thank you very much, Alice. And I'm guessing you're leading into money transfer. So Jonathan, actually maybe over to you then. And the first question is, what is the difference between a currency broker of a bank?
Okay, thank you, Emily. So the main difference is going to be the exchange rate. We can demonstrate savings over the banks. As a broker, we sort of go out to market. It's a bit like, say, mortgages or other financial products where you can do it through your bank, but actually sometimes going to a broker, a specialist, is the best way, because they're a specialist in that particular area, and that's what Lumon can do. We do a sort of mystery shopper every so often with the banks out there, and generally speaking, we're looking around sort of 1 to 2 cent saving, which may not sound like a huge amount if you're doing, say, travel money, but actually on a larger amount, for every, say, £100,000 transferred, that could be a €1,000 to €2,000 difference. So depending on, of course, how much you're doing and over the lifetime of the property, those small percentages can really, really add up. So that's the sort of headline reason for working with us, a better rate. But actually, it's really the service. And when you register with Lumon, you get instant access to a Euro wallet. We've just been talking there about this 3-month timeline. If you use the bank, you've got to buy your currency when the payments are due in that timeline. Now, this month, the rates have moved almost 3 cents just in 3 or 4 weeks. So, of course, over 3 months, who knows what the rates are going to do. Now, Lumon allow you to actually lock in an exchange rate during that 3-month period when perhaps the rates go up, or if you're concerned it's going to drop. So it's very much a service to sort of guide you through the market and what's happening. And then we've got some different sort of tools to help you lock in a rate at a certain point in the process, so you're not going to get suddenly a property a bit more expensive than perhaps you'd bargained for.
Great, you answered question 2 as well, which is fantastic. The question was, can you offer any tools to help with currency volatility? So you do. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Yes, there's quite a few different tools out there, Emily.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, it's the sort of timing and planning aspect there. So if you've got money available, you can use this wallet as your sort of tool, as I say, to purchase if the rate's gone up a bit. So you've bought your currency, whatever happens to the rate after that doesn't matter. And then you have your euros in this, basically a euro bank account that you can then pay direct to the notaire. And that's generally going to be much easier, whilst you will eventually want to open a French bank account for your purchase there for utilities, bills and general living costs and things like that. Actually, for the bulk payments for the purchase, it's sometimes a lot easier to get the money paid out of your Lumon wallet direct to the notaire. We've got a very experienced payments team. They can handle all of that. It's much simpler than, as anyone who's moved a large amount of money in the past, if you try and do that through your bank, you sometimes got to book an appointment with them. There could be security checks. It's not always straightforward. So we can just streamline that process, and that's much simpler. And then there's also a contract option, and this is a very popular one at the moment, called a forward contract, where you fix an exchange rate for payment in the future, but you don't actually have to pay all of the money now. You pay a very small deposit, somewhere around, say, 5%, but the rate is fixed throughout, say in this example, that 3-month window. So if you've got your money invested, if you're waiting for, say, a property in America or the UK, wherever you live, to sell, to actually fund your purchase in France, you can lock in the rate. And you may just do that on part of the money. You might say, well, look, I'm not overly confident on the rates, but I certainly don't want to see it going down. So I'm just going to fix in on, say, 50% of my money. I'll leave the rest to the market. And then maybe if it goes up again, you can lock in at a different, better time. So there's quite a few ways to approach this. And one of the first things I'll do with a client and my team will do is just talk through some of these different tools to actually buy the currency and just understand you, the client. Some people are very defensive. They want to protect what they have. They don't want any risk. They want to know exactly what their property is going to cost early on. Others are a bit more happy to take on the risk and happy to be a bit more speculative, and we can track the market and sort of guide them through what's happening.
Fantastic, thank you. And last question is, are you able to use your service prior to having a destination account, and does this help with holding funds?
Yes, absolutely. So pre-registration, within a few minutes of speaking to us, you can have an active trading account. Depending on your jurisdiction, there may be some extra questions, you know, copy of a passport or something or other. We have to verify client identity as part of the process, but certainly within a few minutes, within, say, 24 hours, we can have an active trading account, and that gives you access to this wallet. Now, if you're looking to open a bank account in France, you may, in some cases, need to have an economic interest with some of the banks there. And as I say, really, for these important payments for the purchase, you don't really want to be using the French bank for that, for the reasons I've explained. So do you need a destination account to buy currency? No, you don't. You get this euro wallet once you're registered, and then you can use that to buy euros, to hold them, or just to pay directly to the notaire. So it really does streamline the payments in the very early stages of the purchase, and then you can use it for your living costs and other bits and pieces that you'll have for the future.
Cool. Thank you very much. I like the fact that you can lock it. I'm not a risk taker, so I do really like. I would be the one saying no, protect, and please don't do anything like speculative with my money. So it's really, really good. Well, let's then go to Tom then, if I may. And the first question for you is, have the most recent UK and French budgets presented any opportunities for people considering buying in France?
Yes, I think they have. I mean, what we've started to see is that in the UK, there's a definite trend towards increasing taxes, and we're now seeing an exodus of people, people leaving the UK and looking at other jurisdictions, other countries to be tax resident. And it may surprise some of the attendees of this webinar to hear that actually France can be one of those favorable tax jurisdictions. People don't often think of France as being a tax haven or a particularly tax-friendly country, but actually if you organize your affairs, you organize your assets in the right way, then it can be. So lots of people are at the moment are exploring the idea of living in France, exploring the idea of buying French property. To give you some examples of what's happened in the recent budgets, so the most recent UK budget was in the autumn of last year. We saw the introduction of UK inheritance tax on pensions, which will come in from 2027. There are a lot of people that have UK pensions that don't feel particularly happy about that. And France, or moving to France and becoming French tax resident, gives them an opportunity potentially to extract their UK pension from that system. And they can organize it in such a way that it may be possible to pass it on without any inheritance tax in either France or the UK. So that's one example. I think also we've seen the income tax bands in the UK have been frozen, and it's kind of a tax increase by stealth. People don't necessarily notice that their incomes, asset prices are increasing gradually, but the bands are frozen, and it means that over the medium to long term, people pay more and more tax. By contrast, in France, the income tax bands are indexed each year with inflation. So more and more, France is looking like an interesting destination for people. But I think really it just comes down to planning. If you are interested in looking at French residency, we at Blevins Franks can have a look at your situation and really ascertain what are the particular angles you should be looking at, what areas of French tax could work for you, and that's something that we can do as part of our service.
Okay, it's interesting because as you say, you don't really think about France as being a tax haven at all. But as you said, I didn't know about the indexing of the income, for example, which is really interesting. So next question is, should I sell my UK property, and if so, is it better to sell it before moving to France?
I think there are a couple of situations that a person might consider keeping a UK property. And one is if it could just be a lifestyle choice. Maybe they just want a bolt hole in the UK to go back to, or somewhere they can return to in future. Or it could be that they have an emotional attachment to the property. But the other situation is where somebody is thinking about retaining a UK property as an investment. And I would say that UK property as an investment for a tax resident doesn't work so well. It's not the most tax efficient type of investment that you could have. Doesn't work particularly well in terms of inheritance because it gets hit not only potentially for UK inheritance tax, but also French succession tax. You do get some relief because of the treaty, but effectively you end up paying the higher of the two liabilities. Also in terms of income tax, again, it's not really optimized for the French tax system. You know, I suppose if you have a property in the UK, then you have the hassle of managing that from afar. So there are lots of reasons why French residents and indeed French nationals don't tend to buy up UK property as an investment. Of course, if you sell a UK property, then it could add to your budget to buy the French property of your dreams. In terms of timing, I would say that it really depends on the circumstances. It depends on you know, how long you've owned a property, how many years you've occupied that property, what the gain is on the property that you're thinking of selling, and also any works that you've done to it. So there are lots of factors to take into account when you're selling a property. Generally speaking, I think if somebody is selling their main home, and it's always been their main home since they've owned it, it's usually better to sell the property before they move to France. There is a bit of a leeway. You do get kind of 9 months once you move to France to sell that property completely tax-free. But it's, to be on the safe side, it's better to do that before you make the move. When it comes to other situations, you know, rental properties, investment properties, or second homes, it could be actually that it's better to sell that UK property once you're resident in France. Again, it just really depends on the situation. But one of the things that we do at Blevins Franks is, as part of a wider strategic plan, we can look at the potential sale of a UK property, and we can give you the calculations and help you make an informed choice, informed decisions as to when to sell that property.
Thank you. I thought it was a tricky question because, as you say, it depends on the person's circumstance. So the best is probably to contact you and just say, this is my situation, what is best for me, because it's a very open-ended question. And the next question for you is, how can I buy a French property while avoiding becoming a French tax resident?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, this is a question that we get quite a lot, actually, and I think it stems from an anxiety. I can understand that people feel anxious about the idea of moving from maybe a tax system they feel quite familiar with to one that they're not so familiar with. I mean, it's certainly possible to buy French property and just have it as a second home. What I think is problematic sometimes is people enjoy spending time in France, and they find that, you know, particularly if they don't have EU citizenship, they can only spend 90 days within a 180-day rolling period. And then they have to leave for 90 days before they can come back to France. And that is, for many people, quite restrictive. You know, time goes quickly when you're having fun in the south of France. So I would make the argument that actually French tax residency can give you the best of both worlds, because if you are a French tax resident and you have a titre de séjour, a residency card, then you can spend as much time as you want in France. You can also still, you know, if you're a UK passport holder, you can still go back to the UK and spend some time in the UK. And what you might find actually in that situation is, as I kind of alluded to in some of the previous answers, is that the tax may be lower in France than it is in the UK, particularly if you're doing your planning, particularly if you're retired or you have your business interests in the UK. Then moving to France can be a really smart move. But as I said before, it all comes down to planning. The worst kind of thing that somebody can do, I think, is just move to France without necessarily planning in advance. By doing the planning, you're going to know what you're walking into, and you can make sure that if there are any tax opportunities, you know, any opportunities to dispose of assets tax-free, for example, you can take advantage of those. So yeah, it really comes down to planning.
To planning, yeah. Again, I think that's why everybody is on this call. Is in the end, it's all about talking to the experts and making sure that you're as ready as possible. So that there is actually one question that I will ask at the end of the session that was really interesting. So you will get why. I thought that was a really good question. So if I go to Liam, if that's okay, to finish on our financial side of things before we go on to the lifestyle with Tracy. So Liam, the first question for you was, what is the maximum loan to value available with retail and private banks in France?
Yeah, so this is a common question which happens with agents and clients directly. So pre-visit, we do encourage that clients prepare their financial affairs. And going back to Tom's buzzword of planning, I think it's the most important part of any French property journey. So with a retail bank here in France, the maximum loan to value is between 80 to 85% for a UK resident. So that's really the max. That's very suitable for salaried employees and people who I would say are actively working and not moving towards retirement. The reason why I say that is some banks put in place some caveats that when borrowers hit a certain age, that they discount their income because they view the borrower maybe moving out of a secure position, let's say. So that would, if a borrower's, let's say 45, 50, looking for a 20, 25 year mortgage, 85% loan to value is good. With a private bank, which a lot of our borrowers look at, notably in the French Alps, Côte d'Azur, and in Paris, they finance the acquisition slightly differently, which would be very unfamiliar to a UK borrower or a US borrower. So they would finance the property up to 100% loan to value, subject to an independent valuation report instructed by the bank, paid for by the borrower, and they would require financial assets to be placed with the bank, which would give all in all a best case scenario of 70% net loan to value. So meaning the client would need to move to the bank around 30% of their assets, and that would need to be liquid assets. So it cannot be a pension, it cannot be, you know, anything which is vested. It needs to be very liquid, essentially transferable within the 2 or 3 month period. So yeah, again, going back to Tom's point, planning, speaking to the broker, understanding your loan to values, understanding your equity is very advisable, very early on.
Cool. And before viewing properties in France, is pre-approval available?
Yes, so it's something again which is very familiar in the UK and US. That many borrowers have a pre-approved letter before a visit, and it puts them in a position of power with sellers. I would argue the market now, I wouldn't say it's a buyer's market, I would say it's an opportunistic market, notably in the higher range. So going to a property visit with a pre-qualification letter, it's non-binding, unlike in the UK or US, but it does show to the agent that you're a serious buyer. And if you do make the offer, that letter from a regulated broker here in France is worth its weight in gold. So if, for example, you go to a visit and you say, I've spoken to a broker, he's already put me in touch with 4 banks, we've done the affordability measurements, here's my cash equity, you know, all pre-approved, here's a good word, reputable broker, put that in front of a notaire, agent, seller, they're going to respect it. Many local sellers and agents do get quite worried with non-residents. I think notably during the Brexit period, lots of French banks simply stopped lending to UK clients. So it made sellers on edge for the last 2 or 3 years. Now, luckily, in the last 12 months, we have some really active lenders who have came back to the market, and they're really picking up the Brits again, because I would say we're the best borrowers, in my humble opinion. But no, like again, non-binding is the key, but preparation, planning, having something to hand before the visit, you know, that could be the difference of negotiating 5 or 10%.
I see. Like, so I'll go back to Alice actually quickly. Do you see a difference, Alice, when someone comes with pre-approval or not?
Absolutely, and we're very grateful to Liam very often for exactly that, because it really does help us in our market. It really, really does. And Liam has a lot of experience in that, and so 100%. 100%.
I think it's a very complementary business in the sense that you know, if a client essentially lands in Nice airport and an agent's about to dedicate, you know, 2 or 3 days of their personal time, really, and just, you know, personal and business time. Sometimes visits do happen at the weekend. Again, having that letter ready or pre-approval status, I mean, they're really going to buy into you as a borrower as well, and they're going to go really, you know, they're going to search the market, find the best deals. And again, with Alice and her international team, having these letters, knowing that they're going to more than likely collaborate with a different agency who might be a little bit worried that it's a non-resident buyer, it makes everybody feel at ease.
And the last question for you for now is, upon signing an offer and it being accepted by the seller, how long is the process of obtaining a non-resident mortgage in France?
Back to the buzzword of planning, right? Look, I mean, we have got deals over the table in 6 weeks. It really goes down to the borrower. I mean, I would say on average 10 weeks is quite good from the point of introduction, when maybe an offer has been made and there's a 2-week transition period between the offer and the official sale agreement to then closing. I mean, some sellers will be very harsh on the buyer and say they want to have financing approved within 8 weeks. Again, it's a non-resident buyer and they're a little bit worried. Again, that can be done, but here in France, if you're buying in your personal name, which most of the clients do, there's a 10-day calling off period between receiving the loan offer, it being DHL to the UK, the US, and then it coming back. So that always creates delays. There could be a missing signature there, something there. But I would say to get a loan approved, 8 weeks, to get a loan drawn down, funds at the notaire, 10 weeks, and then we recommend 12 weeks just because, you know, it creates a small buffer. Yeah,
just for breathing space, 12 weeks. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's really the planning point. If a client is put in touch with me even before they view properties, we could have done we can do 70% of the work at that point. So that's really important part, and getting clients in front of borrowers very early so they do understand the intricacies of buying a property here in France, because it is very different to the UK or the US.
Thank you. And Tracy, now over to you for all the visa and element of things. So the first question for you is, if I want to move to France and not work, which is the best way, why would you? Which visa do I need, and what will I need to show as financial proof?
So yeah, moving to France and not working, I think that's considered living your best life in France. So I definitely encourage that. That's our motto at LBS. So yes, of course, moving to France from any country, so wherever you're coming from, it's a non-European, you're going to need a visa. And as a retiree or an early retiree, the visa you want to apply for is a long stay visitor's visa. It's called visitor's visa. It doesn't mean say you're a visitor. It is a residency card. So the visa is what you apply for to come into France, and the residency card is what you get to stay in France. So that's the first thing. So you'd apply from country of origin, and then once you have your visa, you come to France. Of course, it gets validated in France. From a financial perspective, it's one of the criteria that you have to show, of course, for a long stay visitor's visa. And the financial criteria is that you're not a burden. So what does that mean? It really means that you need to show to the authorities that you have sufficient means to look after yourself, and or if you're a couple, both of you. So it would be at least looking at the minimum earnings level in France, which is commonly known as the SMIC. So that would be 1,400 euros net approximately. I'm just rounding that down. If you're a couple, then I would round it up to 2,000. It's not a double amount, but about 2,000 euros monthly. Although, of course, when I'm working with my clients, when we go through a consultation, we look at step by step what their situation is and what their financial situation is to put together the evidence for that. Because, of course, how is that made up? It can be made up of lots of different documents. It could be private pensions, it could be state pensions, it could be savings, investment funds, it could be the owner of your property. You know, if you bought your property with Alice and you're an outlaw, you don't have a mortgage, then of course you would have that taken into account because you have no outgoings from a rental or mortgage perspective. So the financial criteria has a kind of a guideline, but then how you show the evidence to the visa centre is something different, and that of course is what we do as part of a residency relocation planning meeting, is take you step by step, not only through the visa process, but of course all the other problems you're going to encounter, or processes anyway, that you're going to encounter when you come into France. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I hope it does. Just a reminder to everyone on this call that there is a chat. If you have more questions following what the experts are sharing, please share your questions in the chat, and we'll come to that later on when we have the time. Next question is, if I become a permanent resident of France, do I get access to French healthcare, and what will I pay?
Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. Anybody, first of all, anybody who becomes a resident of France has access to healthcare in France, and the level of service and reimbursement rates is the same for everybody, no matter what your nationality is. So I think that's important to mention. So yes, you have to be a permanent resident to get access to the French healthcare, of course, with the appropriate visa or residency card. Yes, access for everybody. What will it cost? Well, I think it's important to say here the French healthcare system is not free at source. So it's very different to the UK system, and very different to the American system. I guess that's a lot of the key people who'll be watching this maybe later on. So the French healthcare system is not free at source, but it's not also extremely extortionate from a cost perspective either. So I think, you know, it's important to know that when you go and see a doctor or a consultant, you're going to pay upfront for your consultation. If you take example of a GP in France, you'll pay 30 euros upfront. So it's not free at source, you'll pay 30 euros upfront. But the reimbursement rates for GP visits and consultations in France are at 70%. So effectively you get reimbursed 70% of your 30 euros that you have paid your GP, minus a €2 obligatory payment. So generally speaking, you get reimbursed 19 euros for the 30 euros. So that's kind of what you would get paid up front for GP. Of course, that will change depending if you're seeing specialists or if you're going to hospital. Hospitals are reimbursed at 80%. On the other hand, what you will also have to think about is if you come into France as a retiree or an early retiree and you don't have any earnings per se, then there is a charge for access and healthcare. It's the other Puma system, which you may have heard of. And really, that's really for people who have investment funds or have, you know, rental properties, money coming in through investments, and rental property is considered investment, but don't have actually a business or salaried in France. So they will look at your tax return, and depending on what that investment income looks like, they can charge you a percentage of that towards the healthcare system. So that's an important point to look at as well. And of course, again, it's something we'd point out to you when we've understood your situation in more detail. So it's not exactly free. On the other hand, if you are in a very difficult situation financially, of course, those people would get free access to healthcare. So there is an element of healthcare that is free for those that are the most in need. But my advice on healthcare is everybody can affiliate to it, but it is a contributory system, so everybody pays into it in some way or form.
Okay. And I want to buy a second home in France, but not sure what visa to get since Brexit.
Oh yes, that one comes around quite often. First of all, buying a second home in France, you don't necessarily need a visa, of course. You can come across on the 9180 and enjoy your second home for 90 days out or 180. But I think Tom mentioned that earlier, it's not always appropriate because you want to spend more time, especially if you're in the south of France where the weather is rather nice for longer than 3 months of the year. So there are some options open to you. It depends. If you don't want to become a permanent resident, of course, a permanent resident, you could do a long stay visitor visa, which we just discussed. But if you want to have more flexibility for that second home, then I would suggest a 6-month visa. A 6-month visa, which is a tourist visa, so you don't become a resident, so you don't become a tax resident. You just get more flexibility to spend more time in France without counting those days. Again, it's an application you do from country of origin. You apply just for 6 months, and that gives you 6 months in 12. So, you can spend maybe 4.5 months or 5 months and then go back to your country of origin and not worry that you're going to get stopped or you'll have a problem coming back in because you've overstayed your welcome. So I highly advise this visa for people who have second homes and want to spend a bit more time without worrying about the 9180.
Cool, thank you very much. We've received loads of more questions and I'm aware of time. I mean, I didn't stop anyone because I thought it's so interesting and I didn't want to stop you in your flow. So what I'll try to do is to pick the one question that I think maybe people would be more interested in, and then, as I say, we'll share the contact details for everyone on the panel, so that if you have questions that haven't been answered tonight, please contact the expert and they will answer your question. So maybe Alice, there are so many for you, but okay, so let's see what is the latest themes on properties and areas which are expected to boom?
Very interesting question. And if I had a crystal ball, I would be investing there right now myself. It really depends. Of course, I'm based in Cannes, specialized on the French Riviera. So that's where my level of expertise is. I couldn't tell you much about the rest of France, but certainly there are locations that are far better known. Such as Cannes, Nice, Saint-Tropez, etc. Of course, there are names that ring in your ears. You know it already. Price levels go in accordance with that, of course. But there are some really wonderful little villages and little pockets that are less known. Whether or not they'll have a property boom, who's to say? And I wish I had that crystal ball. But what I can tell you is that they potentially offer something a little bit different in terms of very similar to lifestyle as what is on offer in the names that we know, but offering potentially different styles of properties, better value for money potentially. And this is again where it's not a bad idea to be working with one particular agent that you really have a connection with, you really explain what you want and need. And if your agent is living here, knows the locations, they might just recommend areas to you that you would never have known or thought of. So I'm answering the question perhaps a little differently to how it was posed, but I think it's important to understand that there's actually a lot more to the French Riviera than the names that we think of. There are some beautiful, beautiful locations and villages that you may never have heard of, and it's worth exploring them. So, but having an agent that understands what you need and want, and then being open to areas that you maybe haven't thought about before.
Thank you very much. Next one for Tom, which you may have somehow maybe already answered, but I thought it was a good question. We aim to become permanent French residents, but want a small house in the UK to rent out and as a butthole just in case. What impacts should I be aware of around tax?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as I said before, UK property, I can understand why some people choose to hold on to it, but purely from a tax and investment point of view, it's not the best type of asset for a French resident. First of all, if you have an income from a rental property in the UK, you still have to do a UK tax return and declare that income in the UK. And although that income isn't directly taxable in France, it does potentially have an impact on the rest of your taxable income in that it potentially can push it up into the next tax bracket. So indirectly, it does impact on your French income tax. Then there is, if you're retiring in France and you're dependent on income, having a rental property in the UK, I think, creates a bit of risk. There's a tenant risk. If you go through a period where you don't have a tenant, or you have a tenant who doesn't pay, that does leave you a bit vulnerable. So we tend to favour investments that are a bit more accessible, a bit more liquid. One of the problems with a property is it isn't liquid. So if you need to access an income or access some money from it, say to renovate your French property or to go on a nice holiday somewhere, you can't do that with a UK property unless you sell it or unless you remortgage it. So it's a bit more restrictive. Also, depending on the rest of your assets and the rest of your situation, there may be an inheritance implication when it comes to holding a UK property. It will be assessed for not only UK inheritance tax, but also potentially French succession tax. And if you've got a significant property holding overall, when we take into account your French property and your UK property, you may find yourself within the wealth tax category. As I said before, there are lots of reasons why French nationals and French residents don't tend to invest in UK property, and it's because they're simply not incentivized to do so. So I would suggest, if you're investing for an income in UK property, or you're thinking of investing in UK property, maybe have a chat with Blevins Franks, and we can look at some alternatives.
Thank you. Jonathan, for you, we're just finalizing our offer. What are some of the currency forecasts ahead, and how can I get the best rate?
Okay, exciting. This is my what I really like talking about, what's going on in the markets, what's going to happen next. Well, the first thing I'd say is, good luck with your offer. And I think I mentioned earlier, it's that there's sort of two main approaches that I say clients can take with this. Like I say, a more sort of defensive strategy to protect what they have. As you said, Emily, that sounded appealing to you, almost like a fixed rate mortgage. Obviously, it's not a mortgage you're taking out, but you're fixing it in. You know exactly what you're going to be paying up front, or the more sort of speculative approach where you just do your deposit initially, and then we try and develop a strategy for your balance. Now, actually, if we look at some of the forecasts ahead, there were quite a few predictions at the beginning of the year that the euro was going to be weaker, largely because of interest rate cuts. That's one of the biggest drivers of currency movement. The Eurozone was predicted to be cutting their interest rates more aggressively than the UK and the US. So a lot of the forecasts had the euro getting weaker. And just this month, we've had a bit of a shift in sentiment, and what we've actually seen now are some expectations with Mr. Trump sort of shifting his focus apparently away from Europe. Germany has very much stepped up and said it's going to be spending a lot more money on defence, and that's actually seeing a bit of a return in strength for the euro. Buying euros is actually still at quite an attractive level compared to the last sort of 18 months, whether you're holding dollars or sterling, but the euro has become a bit more expensive, and those forecasts really have changed. Now, some of the most recent data I have is actually produced at the beginning of this month, just before we had a bit of turmoil in the market, sort of halfway through this month, where we saw quite a big shift on certainly sterling euro rates and dollar euro rates. So the sands of time with this are always shifting, and what we do for clients to give them those forecasts is we look at research from about 50 different banks. Now, all this generally shows to me is that no one knows what's going to happen. And there's a common myth out there. Some people think, oh, there's a secret to the currency market. You know, someone out there must know what's going to happen. They don't. The currency market is just a reaction to what is happening globally. And as I say, there's been some big political changes. You can try and predict this, but you can't guarantee what's going to happen. But some of the earlier forecasts in the month did actually have the euro getting quite a bit weaker at times this year. So the market remaining very favourable for euro buyers, but that has just shifted a little bit in the last couple of weeks. So the thing is, the rates are obviously changing themselves all the time, and so are these forecasts. But we can give clients a real snapshot of the market and say, out of 50 banks at the moment, 30 of them, for example, are predicting the rate's going to go up. And we can target particular rates and say the probability of hitting this level is, say, 10% or 15%. Based on what some of the other banks out there are forecasting. So no guarantees with any of this, but that doesn't mean you should just totally ignore it because it's not something that you can know. We can try and give you some data and some intelligence to it all to help with that word planning, as Tom and Liam have both mentioned.
Thank you, but no crystal ball for Jonathan or for Alice, which is very unfortunate. So actually, well, talking about interest rates, Liam, for you, many borrowers anticipate fixed interest rates to drop in the short to medium future. Can I renegotiate the fixed rate during the tenor of loan facility?
The answer is yes. So if I go back to one of the previous questions on the maximum loan to value from one of the retail banks, on that particular product, they do not. So if you go up to 85% loan to value, it's just a fixed rate, non-negotiable. That's just how it is. If the borrower is willing to go to a lower LTV, it opens up more banks. And with the more local banks, let's say, who have a local presence, it's actually common practice over here in France that you can renegotiate your rate during the tenor of the loan. So again, with a good broker, good banker, good team, that's certainly a point you can include in the contract. Most of the time, what they recommend and what we go by is that if, let's say today, the interest rate over 20 years is 3.7% fixed, we can suggest and hopefully get it into the contract that if the swap rate drops by 50 basis points during the next 20 years, the client has the right to renegotiate. There's a small fee which the client will incur, but the long-term saving massively outweighs it.
Good. And Tracy, for you, actually, it's a question that came twice, or actually quite often. What happens if someone is British and the other one is has a European passport? So one of the questions was, how many days can I live in France if my wife is Irish and holds a European passport before considering residency?
So effectively, there's a good point if you're married to an EU spouse. So first point of advice is keep them. So that will facilitate funds. Used to be British passport, keep them, but no, it's no longer British. You've got a European passport holder as a husband or wife, then yeah, they're a keeper. Why? Because that allows you to, you have to joke about some of these subjects, you know, because, you know, and we're 8 o'clock here in France, so, you know.
Yeah.
So, an EU spouse, really what would mean is you can come to France on the 9180 with your Irish or, you know, German passport holder, husband or wife. It doesn't affect how long you can stay in France. You still have the 9180 rule. Obviously, your wife or husband doesn't because they have a passport, an EU passport, but you still have to only respect the 9180 rule. The difference is if you want to become a resident, obviously you've got the 6-month visa if you want, but if you want to become a resident, you don't have to come in with a visa. You can come to France with your EU spouse, and you can apply from France directly for an EU spouse residency card directly online via the ANF website. It's a process. It takes between 4 to 6 months, so it's not something that's easy to go through. Same criteria, you know, you have to have healthcare, you have to have financial status, but it's obviously avoid having to go through all the visa process in your country of origin. You can come into France within the first month, request your residency card as married to an EU spouse holder, or paxed with, or concubine for X amount of time with the proof, and you can apply from France. But apart from that, if you just want to come on a holiday, you can't spend more than 90 days. It doesn't matter that you've got an EU spouse. You have to respect the 9180 rule. There you go.
Thank you. I hope that the system is not going to explode because it's 7, but I have one more question. If you can be really brief in your answer. I just thought it was such a good question. What is the most common mistake people make when moving to France? Alice?
I don't think there is one. Is
Okay.
there an answer?
There is one. It's an answer.
For it.
Tracy, any one common mistake that people make when moving to France?
Absolutely. There is one common mistake that everybody makes, is they underestimate how much time it takes to move countries. They underestimate how long it takes to go through the visa process, the healthcare process. They think it's a lot quicker than it actually is. And so therefore they underestimate when they should reach out for support. I mean, you know, everybody here on the panel knows about how difficult it is to go through different processes, and they're all here to help. But yeah, underestimating the amount of time and therefore not reaching out soon enough. Reach out sooner rather than later to get the support that you need.
Planning. Tom?
Yeah, we've talked about planning before, and I think that's it. It's people not planning in advance, not taking advice. People, from our perspective, when we're helping people becoming French tax resident, if they've moved without necessarily taking advantage of tax breaks before they leave the UK, you know, that can have a major impact on their planning. So it's about looking at the situation in advance.
Thank you. Liam, anything to add?
Perhaps stating the obvious, not learning French before arriving. I mean, there's a lot of Brits that move down here and just expect everybody's going to, you know, speak their language. Now, we do live in a place where that's commonly accepted, but I think to really embrace, you know, the la belle vie dans le sud, I think it's quite good to learn a few French words and be more open-minded to other communities.
And you might need it for your visa process moving forward, because the language levels are for visas. So I always advise my clients to learn the lingo.
Learn the lingo.
Exactly. Watch a few Only Fools and Horses episodes.
Absolutely.
And Jonathan, anything from you?
Just not to assume that the rates will remain in your favour or go in your favour. I find generally clients are more optimistic on the rate, that it's just going to work out for them, or, you know, they're just going to hold off and wait till it's at that perfect moment. Unfortunately, the currency markets isn't that easy to predict. It's impossible. No one has that magic crystal ball, I'm afraid. So back to that P word, the planning, extremely important.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. I know that we overran a little bit, but I could talk about it forever. It's so interesting. I find that absolutely interesting. You all have your areas of expertise as well. So I would encourage anyone who is thinking about moving to France to reach out to every single one of you, just to make sure that they're planned. They know exactly what they're meant to be doing, and they're not making any silly mistake that could potentially cost them a lot of money as well. So thank you all very much. I'm sorry we couldn't go through all the questions. So as I say, reach out to each of the experts if we haven't gone through your questions already. And yeah, I think, Jonathan, have I missed anything, or I think we can say goodbye?
That's perfect, Emily. It's been a fantastic evening, very insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à tous. Et au revoir. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.